Good morning and welcome, everybody. In particular, everyone watching on replay, because you're catching the very beginning of this show. It's Sree's Sunday New York Times read along, and we have a great show planned for today. Our guest is Professor Pawan Dhingra, author of Hypereducation: Why Good Schools, Good Grades, and Good Behavior Are Not Enough. We'll also be joined later in the show by Marina Kurian, MD, co-host of She's on Call, a new live stream that airs at 11 a.m. Eastern Time. Her co-host for that show is Sujana Chandrasekhar. Make sure you stay and watch that show as well. Our host, of course, is Sree Srinivasan, host of the New York Times Read Along for 5 years and counting. We're live on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, and YouTube. And we're also live on Pawan's Facebook and Twitter accounts. So if you're joining us there, thank you for watching. Without further ado, we'll bring on Sree Srinivasan. Sree, how are you doing? We just have to unmute your mic, Sree. There we go.
Great. Great to be here. Let's show the paper.
Absolutely.
There we go. Now you can hear me. Sorry about that, folks. My fault. Neil does a fabulous job with the production. Neil and the production crew are what make the show great. And then there's user error by the terrible host of the show occasionally. Greetings, everybody. Welcome. We are thrilled to have you here for the New York Times Read Along. We're coming on 5 years of this show, and you can see the New York Times laid out in front of you. I'm coming to you live this time from Fire Island, where we come every summer for a couple of weeks. And we escaped the lockdown in Manhattan last week to be in lockdown here. The good news is everyone's in a mask as far as we can tell, and we are blessed to be here at this time. How are you doing, Neil?
Doing well. We have a number of people joining us. Of course, our friend Jonathan Borstein from Union Square. And for folks who don't realize, that's Union Square in New York, because there are several Union Squares around the U.S. Pawan, we have Guneet Khanna joining us, giving you a thumbs up, so that's great. We have Diane Stefani joining us from Margate, New Jersey. We have Patricia Freudenberg joining us on LinkedIn. Thank you for being such a loyal watcher, Patricia. We really appreciate it. We have Don Pollard joining us from Hastings-on-Hudson, my hometown. Don, congratulations. I believe it was your son graduated from high school over the weekend. I think that might have been last weekend. Saw some pictures. It was great to see the Yellow Jackets doing a graduation, my alma mater, so thank you for that. Of course, we have Carla Baranakis joining us from New Jersey, and we'll be introducing you to Carla and the rest of our producers in just a moment. Linda Lawrence is joining us from Long Island. Pradnya Haldapur joining us from Silver Spring, Maryland. Thank you, Jonathan. Thank you, Pradnya, because Jonathan was clarifying that the second most famous Union Square is in San Francisco. I'm assuming that that means that the number one famous one is in New York City, in the city, as I refer to it. An early kudos from Patricia. Thank you for the New York Times Read Along for being a continuous delivery of human interaction with breaking news. Patricia, thank you for that. We have Carrie Reich joining us from Florida. Another one of our producers, Paula Kiger, as well from Tallahassee. And Don is sharing that his son is going to Amherst in the fall.
Congratulations. Awesome.
We'll ask Pawan about that a little later. I do agree that is, some might consider that awesome, Sree, but as a Wesleyan grad myself, I have to take the good and the bad. Hastings, good. Amherst and Williams are our closest rivals, but we'll take it, Don. We'll take it. Rajni Koticha is joining us from Toronto, and Chris Gorman, who I know is a Yankee fan, is joining us from New York City. So I'm working in all my references, Sree, Wesleyan and the Yankees, in just the first few minutes. I did not know this. Carla Baranakis's father graduated from Wesleyan. So there you go. There's a reason we bring up these references as often as possible. We have Guneet Khanna joining us from Sydney as well. So it really is an international show. Chetna Singh is joining us from New Jersey. Ashok Sharma is here as well.
From Kerala, where my parents live.
Kerala. So we have a great range of people who are joining us. What I'd like to do at this time, Sree, is bring on our producers just to introduce them to everyone. What we'll do, we'll take off the show of the paper just for the moment, and Sree will be muted, but that's okay. We can work around that. So I want to introduce Paula Kiger and Steve Taylor, Julia Weeks, and Carla Baranakis. We have a great team that puts on the New York Times Read Along every week. Without your support, we wouldn't be able to do this. They do a great job of providing context, of sharing links, engaging with the audience throughout the show. So if you have any questions, please reach out to them. We have this Paula Kiger is going to be in our Facebook page, Shree's Facebook page rather. Julia is actually manning LinkedIn this week. Steve Taylor is going to help me produce the show. And Carla, as always, is working behind the scenes, with helping with links, but also getting us great guests. And we'll talk about next week's guest later in the show. But I'm sorry, Sree, I have to pull it out even before we talk about Pawan because I am so excited. Just a sneak peek, Trish Hall, the former editor of the New York Times op-ed page, will be our guest. She is the author, so apologize for the he, of Writing to Persuade. And we definitely are looking forward to that show next week. So Carla, thank you for your help in arranging that. So if you have any questions, please reach out to our producers. They will send us any messages if we need to follow up on any tech issues, but they will be sharing links to articles and providing much needed context for this discussion. It really does make these shows more engaging and really it's a best practice in how to do a live stream show. Too many other organizations just set up a camera and show content, and they don't have anyone providing that background information. So thank you to Paula, Julia, Steve, and Carla for being a great team. You can see Team Read Along scrolling across the bottom, and we definitely want to make sure if you want to reach out to any of them and follow, you can follow myself. I'm at Neil Parekh. Paula is at Big Green Pen. Steve Taylor, Steve DeReeve, Julia Weeks, Julia L. Weeks, and Carla Baranakis on Twitter, Cabara, Cabara, as I like to pronounce it. So thank you again for a great team, and we will let you get back to your duties, and we will get on with the program. Again, our guest this week is Pawan Dhingra, as we mentioned at the outset, and we also have Marina Kurian joining us. She is one of the co-hosts of She's on Call, which is a great new live stream that we have started at 11 o'clock a.m. Eastern time. So let's just clear out our show, and Sree, you're going to get ready to start talking. Before we start talking about the papers, we also have some business to take care of, right? We're going to talk about our sponsors. So we'll see if we can unmute. Sree muted himself. So Sree, if you can unmute yourself, we have folks, the paper.
I just want to thank
The
only way that we can do this is because of our team. You saw the amazing collection of talent who volunteered to help us when we were just getting started. And now we have a business Digimentors that allows us to do lots of virtual events. And we show you this as a showcase of how to do a world-class event with these producers in the different streams. We want to thank our sponsors. We'll get to that in just a second. If any of you have a conference or an event that you are thinking of canceling or postponing, please reach out to us. I like to say, don't postpone or cancel without talking to us. Or if you've already planned something, don't make it just another Zoom call. Make it interactive, make it innovative, make it gripping and compelling the way we do these shows. We have such great reviews from the clients we work with. So let us know and contact us if you can, Sree@Sree.net, and we will talk to you about how you can improve your virtual events. Now let's thank our sponsors.
Absolutely. So we'll go ahead and start with Muckrack. Sree, you'll tell us about this course that you've set up with them.
Sure. This is a course that's now live. It says already here. You can go to mrac.co/social. More than 4,000 people have signed up and they're getting their certificates. It's about a 2-hour course on demand. So you can take it at your pace in 2 hours or 20 days. It doesn't matter. And you'll get a certificate at the end. We cover Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and LinkedIn. I'm very proud of the work we've done. We're getting such wonderful compliments from the attendees. So please check that out. mrac.co/social, mrac.co/social. Over to you for the other sponsors.
Absolutely. So the next sponsor we want to recognize is Magic Bus. We'll just clear the comments out of the way so you can see the card. Magic Bus is a great organization. They imagine a world where children break out of poverty and lead fulfilling, rewarding lives, contributing to their community and to the world around them. As you can see from the card, 7 out of 10 adolescents do not have a higher secondary qualification. 6 out of 10 youth do not have the soft skills necessary for employment. And 3 out of 10 girls are married before they reach the age of 18. Thank you to Magic Bus for being one of our sponsors. In addition to Muckrack and Magic Bus, we also want to recognize Strategy Focus Group. Strategy Focus Group is a global team of human capital strategists committed to helping organizations solve people issues within your organization. They do that by working alongside you to solve your toughest problems and helping you capture your greatest opportunities. Thank you to Greg Gallant and Mike Schneider from Muckrack, Pradnya Haldapur from Magic Bus, and Ron Thomas from Strategy Focus Group. We want you to learn more about these great sponsors. So please check out their websites. We'll put the links on in just a moment. You can see them at readalong.link/muckrack or readalong.link/magicbususa or readalong.link/strategy focus group. And if you're interested in sponsoring the New York Times Read Along, please feel free to contact us. You can contact Sree at Sree@Sree.net, his email address at the bottom of the screen, or myself, Neil@neilparekh.org. And we'd be happy to talk to you about the various sponsorship opportunities we have. And
we're very grateful to our sponsors. Yeah, thank you to our sponsors for making all of this possible.
Absolutely. And again, please check out their links for more information.
Okay, we're going to talk about the paper. Before we bring Pawan on, I just want to tell folks that I'm wearing a shirt that says Art for Life. You can sort of see it. It was designed by the great, legendary graphic designer Milton Glaser, who died day before yesterday at the age of 91 on his 91st birthday. He's known most famously for creating the I Love New York design that many of you have seen. There I am wearing it on the beach yesterday with my wife Rupa, and you'll see pictures of me with, this is our friend Shelley Rubin at the Rubin Museum last September with Milt, and you're seeing that lovely picture of the two of them, and then you'll see a picture of me with Mr. Glaser as well. It was a real honor to meet him. His influence is international and persistent. You know, the I Love New York logo, that was made by Milton Glaser. And to die on your 91st birthday, it's a great blessing that he got to 91. And with that, let's bring on our guest.
Absolutely. So our guest, of course, is Pawan Dhingra, and we're happy to have him join the show.
Hi,
Good
Pawan.
morning.
Good morning. And we always start by asking you how you're doing and where you are. This is our first question to all our guests during this pandemic.
Well, I'm doing fine. All things considered, I cannot complain about how we've been affected by the events of the past few months. So I'll leave it at that. But right now, I'm speaking to you from Minneapolis. Actually, I typically live in Western Massachusetts in Amherst, but we're visiting my wife's family here in the Twin Cities, and so we are kind of at the heart of one of our most recent troubled episodes and injustices. So, but it's great to be here with my family and joining you today.
And when did you arrive there?
We did an epic road trip. We arrived here on Sunday night. We left Saturday morning from Amherst. We spent the night in a friend's apartment that was empty on the way. So yeah, I don't recommend a cross-country trip at a time like this, but we didn't want to fly for obvious reasons. And I say we, I'm talking about my wife, whom you know, and my two kids.
Let's give them a shout out.
Yeah, Charu is in a different room. I'm in her mother's house, and if we could take a tour of the house, which you can't do, you would see all this amazing artwork. In fact, over my other shoulder is one of her pieces. As there's pottery everywhere. She's an amazing artist. It's just a trip. It's just being here is like being in a museum. And my kids, two boys, ages 14 and 11, who are sleeping at their cousin's house right now. So,
how are things in Minneapolis?
Sorry?
How are things in Minneapolis?
Well, we haven't been able to get out a lot. So, but in general, when I was walking around the other day, things don't feel like you wouldn't know something was going on or have been going on for the past few months, or at least month. If you didn't already know, I was at a friend's house who's about a quarter mile from, I don't know if you remember that episode where a tanker truck drove into, right, a set of protesters on the highway.
Yeah.
A very graphic, ugly scene. About a quarter mile from there, and we were walking around, not on the highway, obviously, but in the area. And, there were no, people weren't acting any differently. It was, people, I think, were getting used to this being the new normal. And, but yeah, there's been a lot of work on the ground in terms of the police departments here. The University of Minnesota broke its contract with the police department. There's been a lot of attention to the union boss here. The city council, I don't know the details, but are very active, right? This is a hot button issue. Even if I don't sit on the streets, it's a hot button issue at all levels here.
And of course, they're talking about redoing the police department from scratch,
right?
And reassembling it. So lots of things to talk about with Minneapolis.
Yeah, it's definitely who would have predicted Minneapolis being the center of this? But you can't. That's the whole point, right? This is everywhere. There's no one hot spot for this, if you want to use a word of the day. And this kind of racial injustice happens everywhere. So it could have been any city. So might as well be Minneapolis.
And we've seen it also. It has happened in so many cities. On my daily program where we cover COVID in all its angles, tonight, 9 p.m. Eastern, hope everyone will join us. We do this every single day. We have a show. We've been covering this, and we have just learned how painful this is in three crises: the health crisis, economic, and racial injustice. And we're trying to cover all of them in our daily programming, 9 p.m. Eastern most days, but also some days on the noon Eastern time as well. So before we go on before we get to the paper, I thought we'd just take a look at your book. Oh, you can do a quick shout out to the book, and then we'll go in greater detail after we look at the headlines.
Yeah, I have I happen to have a copy of the book here. Right? This is the book, Hyper Education, and yeah, it's I'm really excited about it, and but more excited to talk about the New York Times.
Thank you, Pawan. And what will people learn by reading the book?
So there's a growing trend. Thanks for asking. There's a growing trend right now that is impacting education, which is the growth of after-school pursuits by families who are in very good school districts or not, but still saying, I want more education for my kids. And so imagine your local Kumon Center or Mathnasium Center, which are already some of the fastest growing companies in the country. They are part of this effort by parents to want their kids to be above and beyond in how much academics they're getting. And what the problem this is creating is that it's widening the educational gap between families. And it's also creating a lot of stress among kids. I talk to teachers, talk to other educators, and they worry some of these kids who are getting tutoring actually learning less than those who aren't. I talk to the kids themselves about what it's like to be in these centers, or what it's like to be in spelling bees and math competitions, and how they feel some of a stigma, right, for being so advanced, or at least being above grade level. And I spend a lot of time talking to the parents, right? Like, why do you want your kids in, why do you care so much about education? And if they're already in a good school district, that you probably moved to that town for the reputation of the schools, you still want them to be doing something academic after school, above and beyond. And some of the lessons you learn are pretty surprising, right? So some things we might expect, right? So parents will say, I want my kids to be above and beyond the school level because, getting into college is competitive. We want to make sure that they are well advanced. But other parents, and many parents, had other more kind of subtle and even meaningful reasons for why they put their kids into something academic outside of school. So, for instance, I asked parents, what do you worry would happen if you don't do this? And one mother said, my grandparents survived the Holocaust. My parents put me through college through their hard work. I want to instill that same sense of hard work for my kids, which is why I have them in an after-school math center. She had 3 kids in elementary school. In other words, she drew a line between her grandparents' survival of the Holocaust to her kids being in an after-school math center, all of which, in her mind, helped create harder working kids, more moral kids. I asked a lot of other parents, whether it be Asian immigrants or not, and they always refer to the sense if we don't do this, have our kids in something academic after school, and they worry their kids won't grow up to value the notion of hard work, to value respecting elders, to value what they have in life. So it's not just about getting better grades. It's not just about, making sure your schools are okay. It's about something about a cultural want these families have. And the issue at stake then, right, is that this is going to go on even if there doesn't have this kind of extra academics, doesn't have much of an academic impact because parents put a lot of meaning into this. And the result then, right, is an increased encroachment on our public school system. We talk a lot about the privatization of schools and charter schools, and a lot of debate and a lot of controversy around these things. But there's another way in which our public schools are being encroached upon by the private sphere, which is a lot of parents putting their kids into after-school for-profit learning centers or for-profit competitions that are run by for-profit companies. And in both ways, parents are saying, we don't trust our school. Again, these are some of the best schools in the country in terms of public school systems. And even then, parents are worried about what it means for their kids' education. So there's a lot at stake. That's what educators are concerned. I talked to college admissions officers who have their own points of view about this and trying to get a handle on this new normal, which I think is going to grow actually because of COVID, which we'll talk about later if you like. But yeah.
You have a question right on the screen. Is this book available in India yet? First of all, when is the pub date and how is it being rolled out?
It got published a few weeks ago, and so it's available, at your local bookstore or your major internet shopping site, whichever one you prefer. And I don't know yet. I've been waiting to find out if it's available in India yet. I think it should be, so I can't guarantee that it is, and if not, it should be soon.
All right. Tell us, in writing and reporting and researching this book, what was the biggest surprise to you as a parent and as a professor observing parents of other kids?
What really surprised me, what worries me, frankly, is the severe disconnect between how parents understand what they're doing and how teachers and other educators understand this practice of, again, like just looking for a bit more education outside of school for their kids. Parents believe that it is an academic and even moral necessity. If they don't do it, there are concerns about what will happen for their children. And if they don't do it, they're not being good parents. But you talk to teachers and educators, it's the exact opposite. They think parents who do this are the quote unquote tiger parents who are not being sufficiently, as one principal of a school told me, parents who do this are basically uncaring and ungrounded. There's a huge disconnect there. And it was saddening to learn how little communication there is between teachers and educators around the kids, around teachers and parents around the kids. So the teachers know these kids as students, the parents know them as children. What we need to do right is connect those two. And the book explains ways in which our education system can slightly change in ways, and parents and teachers can get on the same page to be thinking about the child in multiple dimensional ways. And we're not talking about drastic, reimaginings that are necessary, but things that we can do to help the kids of themselves. Because there are issues around stress. There are issues around educational inequality that are very real. Your kid is not to be involved in this. Your kid to be affected by this. That's one of the things I want to get across. And again, like, it's a new normal. These are some of the fastest growing companies in the country. And they're all over, they're all pockets of the area.
So this is hard to understand or reconcile. You're saying that teachers think these are problems and that the parents are not caring, and the parents think they're caring even more. So how do we solve that?
Well, first of all, the parents and teachers actually need to start talking about this. It was surprising to me how rarely parents would even bother to tell their teachers that they wanted their kids or had their kids into something extra academic. They would say, why would I tell the teacher? Because the teacher can't do anything about this. Teachers, locked into a curriculum that is governed by national testing. So then what's the point of talking to the teacher about giving our kids a bit more extra assignments here or something more nuanced there? The parents thought the teachers were locked into a really rigid top-down school system. When in some degree that's real, right? No Child Left Behind and Race to the Top have had meaningful impacts on our kids' education that are sometimes problematic. And the great educator Diane Ravitch has written a lot about this. So there are truths to that. But at the same time, teachers do have a lot to add about how the kids are experiencing school. Parents don't realize that, as one teacher told me, she sees the third graders who are so stressed that they're nonverbal. They don't communicate, right? And that's how much pressure they feel under. Parents don't realize that that's how the kids experience school. If the kids are getting so worried about grades and performance, one health expert I spoke to says she talks to third graders and she asked them, what do you worry about? And they said, third graders would say, getting into college, the SAT, the state standardized test, right? Unprompted, these are what they worry about. And so they're getting messages from the home, probably inadvertently, right? Because these are not uncaring parents or not ungrounded. But we have to find ways for the parents to talk to the teachers and have local communities kind of help better govern their school districts so that we can find ways for the students themselves to feel empowered while not feeling overburdened, right? And parents need to do a better job of listening to their kids, right? One piece of advice I often give is, what does your kid talk about when you're tucking them in at sleep, or they're tying their shoes to go outside, or they're at the dinner table? What do they show interest in? If you're giving them something to do outside of school that they never refer to and ever in terms of what actually motivates them, you probably are doing the wrong thing. And you need to find ways of invigorating them, and even academically, if that's what you're motivated by, that speak to their interests. So, quick example is, I have two boys, and one's really into sports, and so we talk a lot about sports in our house. And I have them do, ask them to why don't you research this topic around sports statistics if you're really interested in this. And if somewhat feels like work, but it also feels like fun. And I'm not giving him a workbook that he just has to plow through necessarily. So there's ways we can think about this that kind of meet our needs.
Great, Pawan. We'll come back to the book in a little while. Let's take a look at the newspaper I want everyone right now to please tag their friends. Please hit share with your family, friends, colleagues, tag them, because we all know people who are interested in the news, who can read along with us, but also get to meet Pawan and his book, Hyper Education. So whether you're a reader who is a parent of a high school kid or elementary school kid or middle school kid, anywhere in the world, you'll learn something. But also you'll learn something if you are just a taxpayer, citizen. You all need to be understanding the issues raised in the book. So please check out the book, Hyper Education. And now let's look at the paper. The New York Times, we are glancing at it right now, is this is the Sunday paper. We are looking on the front page of Sunday Review. You're seeing here, you want a Confederate monument? My body is a Confederate monument. The black people I came from were raped by the white people I come from. Who dares to tell me to celebrate them? By Carolyn Randall Williams. Incredible essay here. And of course, the artwork and the layout and design. Pawan, have you had a chance to read this yet?
I did glance through it. Yeah, it was such a powerful piece. I mean, you really got to sit with this piece. And I really want to, I mean, I'm not just saying this because not every paper would publish a piece like this and make it such a high profile piece with that wonderful artwork. And it's true, right? I mean, the legacy of slavery goes well beyond what we being non-slave descendants, typically imagine or recognize, right? And you want to put up statues in honor of that, then you are completely misunderstanding, right, what it was about and how people carry that burden today, which ties to another piece I'll get to later, I'm sure, around reparations. This is something that needs to be the next level of conversation.
And here is Arts and Leisure cover is about radical quilting. And that's an unusual story in the Arts and Leisure. Here's small business. Of course, lots to think of in small business and what happens. This country, all the press is about big business, but the real story is that this country is based on small business. The economy is, for sure. And Journey to the Red Planet. This is a New York Times section for kids. I guess this is the New York Times for Kids section. And you're seeing that here. And we had it in one of our previous episodes of the New York Times Read Along. We had two young folks join us and read the paper with us. It was great fun. And here is the cover of the book review. True Grit is the cover. And we will learn what that is later. The cover of the Times Magazine is What is Owed? If Black Lives Are to Matter in America, the Nation Must Pay Its Debts, by Nicole Hannah-Jones. And Pawan, you're in Minneapolis. I can say with confidence that a lot of this that you're seeing is because of what happened in Minneapolis.
Correct.
When you think of the sacrifice that George Floyd made and the impact of his death, no death is, all deaths are in vain. But in his case, the long-lasting impact of what he has unleashed in the world is visible here in these stories. As we see them here and the attention being paid to them. And here's the Sunday Styles section, which again, typically doesn't cover issues like this, is about protests, I think. It says here, teen girls fighting for a more just future. Can you imagine this is the cover of the Sunday Styles section?
I mean, it just shows that every part of the paper, right, is around this in some way, right? There's two major issues we're dealing with right now. This is the aftermath of George Floyd and racial injustice on the one hand, COVID on the other hand, and how, of course, they intersect. But that, every piece of the paper, this is our cultural moment right now, right? And we can see how to respond.
And this is the at-home section, which was launched, as you know, during COVID-19. And there's also the Metropolitan section, which you only get if you're a print subscriber. Here, last Sunday, you're sitting in your seat virtually was Tom Jolly, the print editor of the New York Times. And it was a fabulous discussion of how we think about the paper and how they think about the paper and what they do with it. Did you grow up in a newspaper family?
Not as much. No, not really. I grew up in the suburbs of Dallas, Fort Worth, and we did not get the paper growing up. I actually was really active in student journalism as a high school student. So I'm not sure where that came from. But my father was one, and still is, someone who consumed the news in various ways. And you'll appreciate this. He was a subscriber to, still is, well, until recently, of India Abroad. And so that was something that we saw, but we didn't get the daily paper growing up. But I still became very fascinated by journalism, and I married a journalist, if that tells you something. So yeah. I know our kids now, they see the paper all the time.
That's excellent. And RIP India Abroad.
Yeah.
Great international publication about India issues. Let's look at the front page of the New York Times. Here is a story, how the world missed COVID's symptom-free carriers. Doctors said the seemingly healthy may be contagious, but no one listened for months.
Right.
So sad. This is the silent spreaders, and we all come to regret this. Cases soaring as leadership on virus fails. That's another thing that when you look at Europe opening up now, my newsletter, which I just published about an hour ago for the week, I hope if you subscribe to it, it'll be in your inbox. If it isn't, write to me and I'll tell you how to get it. The headline was that we're not in, America's still in a first wave.
Yeah, we're not.
That's so sad.
Tell Vice President Pence that.
The president and vice president and their enablers, by the way, have to be blamed for everything that's going on. I keep saying in my newsletter and elsewhere, I say, come get your boy. These are the people who supported the president and the candidate for tax purposes and other things, ignored the racism, thinking it'll go away. And we are now paying the price for it in so many ways.
Really fast. Two things I just want to quickly say is both those two main articles you pointed to in the front page are about failures of leadership, but also of our major agencies, right, that we kind of rely on. And so I think that after we get past this major problem, this major episode, we still need our major agencies to do a self-evaluation. What did they do wrong? I mean, blaming our political leaders is important, but it doesn't just stop there. And I think that's one thing just to highlight. The other thing is that, back to the, supporting Trump and come get your boy. This is like, if you voted for him because you wanted, certain kind of judges on the Supreme Court, and you wanted certain kinds of, movement on LGBTQ, clamping down on their rights and promote, the rights of, say, the NRA or gun ownership. In both ways, that hasn't happened for you, right? So voting for him has not led to the successes you wanted. Neil Gorsuch was the one, right, who, of course, led on the have been before the Supreme Court that have not been around gun rights, that have not been held by or heard by the court. So they're not getting what they want. The court has said not worthy of our time. So those people who voted for him for those two issues are not getting what they want. So,
Pawan, we may have missed part of your comment. Just talk about those two issues again. Just give us that brief comment again.
Apologies. Two major issues, right? If you voted for him wanting, to clamp down on LGBTQ rights, or you voted for him because you want to advance gun rights, right? In neither case has Trump's court appointees support helped you, right? Neil Gorsuch, a Trump appointee, was on the right side of history, and he promoted LGBTQ rights recently as a civil rights. That does not serve his Trump's base, and a lot of gun rights cases have been put in front of the Supreme Court, and they've declined to hear them. So again, you're not getting what you want from him, even if you got a little bit of a tax cut. So there's no reason to stick with him, for the next election.
Thanks for that quick analysis there. We're just going to look at the rest of the paper. I see here, don't whistle in elevators, don't even talk. This is the new norm as people go back to high-rise buildings. Officers' goal to fix a force derailed fast. So this is the story of someone who tried to fix the police force. In TikTok era, a new life for a conspiracy theory. I haven't read which conspiracy theory this is. Oh yeah, so this was about how there were so many issues around, the misinformation and disinformation that convinced people that Hillary Clinton and others were involved in all kinds of terrible things happening to young kids and other things, right? That's what that Pizzagate story was.
Yeah, it's one of the most absurd ideas, and yet it became well entrenched.
First American troops reached France in 1917, and you've noticed how we've been hearing more about 1918 and that period than we ever have because of the virus in 1918. And look at this, 5 years of covering Hamilton. So this is about somebody who's been writing about Hamilton. Michael Paulson's been writing about it for 5 years. I think the show itself may be older, so there may be other folks who've written about it, but that's incredible. And we have lots of questions coming for you about your book. So we're going to go right back to the book in just a minute. Everyone, our guest today is Pawan Dhingra, the author of Hyper Education. Everyone needs to check this book out, Tracking an Outbreak. Just jump in if you see anything here that catches your eye. Okay. Look at this, Stand with Women, Stand Against Gender-Based Violence. 47 primaries offer primer on voting in a pandemic. Go ahead.
Just the Stand with Women page, right? Just to highlight, right? We're talking a lot about Black Lives Matter, and so we're talking about race, racial inequality, and we're not talking about gender inequality, right? We're just talking about racial inequality. But it's important, right? These are not unidimensional experiences; these are intersectional experiences. Because we're talking about race, we could be talking about gender. And there's an article, I think, in the paper today or yesterday, around how trans women, trans individuals, have been leading Black Lives Matter, but their lives are not being attended to, right? So this is something to highlight. When we talk about gender, we shouldn't talk about it separate from race. We should talk about all of these things as kind of intersecting, as they say. So just want, as you highlighted gender, I just want to recognize that that should be part of our conversation alongside or with race, not separate from.
Thank you for pointing that out. And Kimberly Crenshaw, who coined the term intersectionality, was the guest on our show. And she is absolutely terrific. They go into exile, then they disappear. This is a story out of Thailand. Poland's president was seen as a shoo-in for re-election. Not anymore. China casts its loyalists within Hong Kong aside. So much going on in the world that we're not paying attention to. And here's the incredibly disturbing story about how Russians are paying bounties to Afghan tribals and others for bounties on U.S. troops.
Yes, that's right. And this is one of the major reasons, right, that we have to ask, what is our president's allegiance right now? Where is his primary allegiance? And these kinds of, incredibly troubled, military affairs, right? We have to wonder that, which is aghast in and of itself.
But we just don't have time for it, so we just keep moving on, including on this show. We just keep moving. That would have been a headline scandal for months if it was anybody else at any other time. And all the hawks who care so much about U.S. military and the vets and everything else should be outraged, but they're not doing enough for that. And then here's a story, in a sign of how different the world has become. There is a new prime minister in Ireland, and his predecessor was half Irish, half Gujarati.
Yeah.
And from his father was from India. Leo Varadkar. Was incredible to think that would ever be possible.
I know.
And Black, transgender, and mobilized. This is exactly what you were talking about, the story you mentioned. And that's what we're seeing here. And this is Nala, Marsha, and Ian.
So this is the highlight, right?
Iani, Iani is I'm not sure how to pronounce it. Yeah.
It's the highlight, like, the Me Too movement brought out something that once it becomes part of our popular understanding, is painfully obvious, right? That women should not have to put up with any kind of harassment or double standard at the workplace, that goes without saying. It's almost like you're saying we should all breathe air. But it took a movement for this to become like an accepted truth, even if it's not properly acted upon. So but what are other kinds of obvious truths that we should be accepting more than we are? I think trans lives are one of them, right? We don't pay enough attention to them. And we should, not just because of the growing numbers, but because it says a lot about what kind of ideas do we have around gender or sexuality. That thinking about trans lives helps us question some of our assumptions about our own kind of sexuality and genders if you're not trans. And that's useful for everybody to do. So I think this is an issue that we should be paying more attention to and treat it as like such an obvious thing as we did the Me Too movement.
Okay, thank you. I think that makes a lot of sense. By the way, my mom's watching in Kerala. Have you been to southern India?
I have not. No.
Okay, we got to fix that.
But
Look at this. State Department wrestles with culture skewing pale, male, and Yale.
Right, that was
And
a
then
fascinating article.
this is a story I actually wanted to talk to you about. Princeton is to strip name of a racist, and the racist here is President Woodrow Wilson. His name's being taken off probably the most famous institution at Princeton, apart from the university, is the Woodrow Wilson School. Can you talk about this and what this means? 4 years ago, the university's board voted against this. And so I credit this entirely to George Floyd for making this happen.
I would say that this is, I guess I would say that I wouldn't credit entirely to George Floyd because this has been going on for a while. Students, alumni, professors, administrators have been trying to push on this for quite a while. Even like you said 4 years ago, that now that we're in this moment, it becomes, okay, yeah, we've been ignoring this or denying this long enough. People have been asking us for this change. Now's the right time because of the George Floyd aftermath and the push for civil rights across the country. But I do think that this is just really the tip of the iceberg. Like changing the name is simultaneously one of the most significant and insignificant things one can do. And so we should applaud it and we should celebrate this change, because you can't have a school of public policy that wants to create a more just and equal society named after someone who actively tried to prevent that from happening. So
let's tell people what he did according to this, so that if anyone's confused about what he did. He said he had overseen the resegregation of federal government offices, including the Treasury Department. And in meeting civil rights leaders, he said, segregation is not humiliating, but a benefit, ought to be so regarded by you gentlemen. This was the official transcript sent out. This was not President Trump callously saying something and then pretending he never said it or lying about it. This was a serious man. I mean, whatever you might say about Wilson, he was a serious person, and he believed these things that he said.
Right. This wasn't like a early 1900s version of a tweet. No, this was something that he, official document, like you said. And this is, part of his legacy, which we have to, recognize and deal with, along with other things that we want to maybe celebrate. And so having a school of public policy of all kinds of things, right? Public policy named after him is very troubling. And so it's a very meaningful shift, which, as you said, only 4 years ago, the board refused to do. But then what does it actually mean for what kinds of classes they offer? What does it actually mean for how different kinds of students are set up for success in the school? What kinds of assumptions what's the assumptions they have themselves around what makes effective public policy, right? Those are things that are deeper, those are more layered, and I'm not judging the school based on those, but those are the kinds of issues that need to be taken up. At Amherst College, where I teach, I'm taking on a new role, the faculty diversity and inclusion officer, where we're dealing with all of these issues, right? Well, what does it mean to actually have a more racially diverse student body or faculty? What does it mean for what we want students to get? How do you experience a university as a faculty of color, or as someone who doesn't identify as a cis normative white male, right? These are some of the things that colleges and universities have to put the effort into to really create an equitable space from the ground up. But the name change is meaningful for what it is.
One thing I'll also say about the paper, Pawan, is that in that story, I didn't see the both sidesism in it. They didn't go out of their way to find somebody who says, well, this is the worst thing that's ever happened.
Yeah, good point.
But they also have a quote similar to yours saying that, this was the most basic step they could take. This is not the greatest step in the world.
Yeah.
And so I thought that was important too. White voters' views on race show change, which is
interesting. That was actually fascinating. I don't know if you had a chance to read that, but that was really good to see. You are seeing slow movement on the general white just attitudes as surveyed around in a slow period of time. Again, this is in the past few months, and that's more. For instance, more people think the racial inequalities by the police is a bigger issue than the looting for instance, by a few protesters. All right, so most whites are keeping the right things in mind as they're judging what's going on right now, and that's really meaningful.
It really is, and it's something that I think we'll all be thinking about as they go along. Look at this change here. Mississippi lawmakers wrestle over the future of a flag with a painful past. This is the last flag in the U.S. that has the stars and bars on it, and I call it flag of the losers. And there's I would say a decent chance that might happen, but it was unthinkable even 6 weeks ago, 6 months ago.
Another great example of something that's incredibly significant and also not that significant at the same time, but it has to change. That's not that goes without question in my opinion.
How closely have you been following the vice president's search? In fact, you could say Vice President Biden's search for a vice president. He has promised it'll be a woman. So here's a who's who in search. And then Amy Klobuchar, who is widely considered to have a very good shot at the vice presidential nomination, has withdrawn and said it should be a person of color. So that was very unusual to see that. And a lot of people would have stayed in the race in this campaign, so to speak, so that they would get leverage for a big cabinet post or something. And by pulling herself out, she put the focus on race. Right. And it's going to be interesting to see what happens.
Yeah. And Frank Bruni, I think it was today, has a piece on why the VP should be Senator Duckworth, who's in the listing.
There she is. Yep.
Yeah. So there's a lot to be thought through around this. And I mean, all kinds of various women who are in leadership positions.
And Tammy Duckworth is very unusual because she's a retired Army lieutenant colonel and helicopter pilot who lost both legs in combat while serving in Iraq. And they list their pros and cons. Miss Duckworth's personal story could be powerful in a presidential campaign. She would be the first veteran on a national ticket since John McCain and the first female veteran ever. She's a less prominent voice on some of the issues most central to the campaign, like policing and the economy, on being considered. I can push back against Trump in a way others can't.
That is
good to see her speaking up and being, they're not shying away, which is important.
It seems her personal story is the most commanding narrative around her, as opposed to, as you just alluded to, the policy positions that she's known for. But that matters in these kinds of elections.
1/3 of Biden campaign staff are people of color. Closing Guantanamo may be politically toxic, but Biden's remains on board. 17 guards face discipline in death of Rikers inmate. And then here is Milton Glazer's obit. I knew it would be a full page obit. I bet another time on a quiet Sunday, he would have gotten a front page obit.
I was thinking the same thing. That could have been a front page story.
Yeah, and because there's no room because of so much happening. And here it is. I love New York more than ever. And and this is the bruised heart after 9/11 that he created. And here he is. At a certain point, we were accepted. And once that happens, everything becomes less interesting. Mr. Glazer, in his Manhattan studio in 2012, he brought wit, whimsy, and skilled drawing to commercial art. I think there's no nicer thing to say. If you could bring wit and whimsy to whatever your skill is in your industry, that's pretty cool. And that's a photo of me. Thank you, Neil, for showing that. A photo of me with Milton Glazer last September at the Rubin Museum of Art, age 91. I'm wearing a T-shirt today that's designed. I'm wearing that T-shirt that he gave me. I'm wearing it today on the show in his honor. I wore it last night on my show. I'll wear it again tonight. Great man, died on his 91st birthday. What a way to go.
Was he being honored at that reception that you were at the museum?
In part, but he was just a great New Yorker, so he'd go to things even if he was not being honored. Like, you know how it is, how some people will only get out of bed if they're being celebrated. And there is my shirt. Thank you, our fabulous producers. And that's the Art for Life shirt that Milton Glazer designed. And I'm very proud to have gotten that. And the fact that I brought it with me is a coincidence. I only had a suitcase with 4 or 5 shirts. And here I am. I happen to bring that. And it's sad to see him go. Here is another article. Kenneth Lewis, I'm sorry if I'm pronouncing it wrong, who challenged views on homosexuality, dies at 76, finding that most analysts adhere to popular prejudice prejudice against gay people, and he covered the history of homophobia, and we are in Pride Month, and so obviously
It's good that he's getting more attention then.
And NASCAR and sports is reduced to 2 pages here, and it
Have you
doesn't
heard
get
about
its own section anymore. What's your sports?
For NASCAR?
Yeah, go ahead.
Did you hear about the noose, the hanging noose?
Yes, of course. Yeah, and then what a coincidence. I mean, this is one of those headlines that said, "Oh, it's not a crime because it was already there, and it's not a noose, it's a pull," things like that. Who knows? What is your sports interest?
A bit too much at times. Yeah, we are pretty knee deep in the NBA around here, and so if you overhear conversations at dinner, you often hear us ranking the top 10 players of the NBA for with no real solid measurements or reasons, just kind of random, oh, Jimmy Butler's much better than
I hope Jimmy Butler's not on your top 10 list. Come on.
No, I actually am a fan of Jimmy Buckets. I like, from what I've heard from my kids, he's I don't know much about him, but from what I do know, he's a pretty interesting guy. Kyrie Irving has other issues. I agree. So I knew these players can be complicated. Let's put it that way. But I will say more than anything, and I used to teach at Oberlin College in Ohio for many years. Our kids were born there. Our first house was there. We were I first got tenure there. And so it's right next to Cleveland. And so we were huge Cavaliers fans, and LeBron James joined the Cavaliers while we were there. And I've been a huge LeBron James fan. I've seen him play a couple times, and so I could not be more proud of being a LeBron James fan now than I ever have in the past. So he's always my number one, and what he's been doing off the court makes me even more proud than what he's been able to do on the court.
You're absolutely right. I love what he's doing. He's stepping up, and he's creating a media empire that's going to focus on equality, and we think that's great. I'm just going to show a cover of the book review here, and just to say to you, it must be hard to publish a book in the middle of this pandemic. The kind of attention you would have wanted to get, the kind of events you would have been able to do are all so hard. That's what everybody, and it's not just you. We had Harlan Coben with us, New York Times bestselling #1 author. We did a show with John O'Leary, Amazon #1 bestselling author. Everybody's in kind of the same boat now, and it's sad. So my heart goes out to all of you authors in this, but thank you for coming here, and let's talk about your book. Let's have you pull out the book and talk. Hold it up again so that we can see it, and let's talk. We have so many questions that have come about the book. Let's see. Okay, there we go. Let's hold it up. Hypereducation.
There you go. Maybe that's a good angle.
Hypereducation: Why Good Schools, Good Grades, and Good Behavior Are Not Enough, by Professor Pawan Dhingra. So what is the 10-second answer to that question? Why they're not enough?
Because we are in a moment where parents are more worried than ever about competition for their kids to get into college and to be what they call to be moral people. And as a result, we are doubling down on our educational commitments in ways that have short-term and long-term implications that are not always positive. Teachers see it, mental health experts see it, kids feel it, but we feel, and here's the problem, right? These are well-meaning parents who are doing what they think is the right thing for their kids, and we're caught in a system where that is going to become more and more typical, and the negative outcomes of that are going to grow more and more. So this is a real issue, and I'm not trying to raise alarms here. I'm not an alarmist person, so I'm not saying this. But at the same time, this is like I said, a new normal that's going to grow under COVID, I think. And so we have to understand, why is our education system seen to be insufficient for parents, even when it's actually doing quite well? Why are we seeing certain kinds of approaches to extracurricular activities that we didn't see a few years ago, and why will that grow?
Does your book cover ideas on how to create educational equity, asks Rick Botello.
Right, that's a great question. Yes, we have to think about educational equity. What do we want out of our school system becomes the most primary question. Do we want a school system where you have these kind of top-down assessments that teachers must meet for their kids, that teachers must meet for students, that then leads to certain kinds of students feeling underwhelmed, and that then creates more pressure for parents to then promote more and more. Is that the kind of education systems that we want, where what it means to be a good student, right, is relatively programmed? Or do you want a system where educational equity really is the goal? Where right now in our COVID moment, we're realizing that a lot of things that are important to us that we wouldn't have thought about as much before. For instance, compassion with others, being creative thinking, showing solidarity, right? These aren't attributes of our school system so much as the kind of quantitative assessments that we do. And so do we want to re-envision what school systems can actually be? And that's possible at the local level. One last thing I'll say really quickly before moving on to another question is Bill Gates has been a major actor in our education system, and Governor Cuomo asked him to help him, quote, reimagine education. I have an op-ed in the Buffalo News around this, why that could be a problem, right? Bill Gates has done a lot of amazing things for a lot of people, and that's wonderful. But in terms of education, he himself has admitted he's made mistakes. So we have to ask, what kind of re-education, what kind of reimagining do we want? And I think that Bill Gates may not be the right person for this. So there are a lot of questions we can ask about educational equity that the book gets into.
Thank you. Linda says, could Pawan share his thoughts on the roles of music, arts, and physical activity as part of a comprehensive education?
This is exactly the nail on the head, right? Even parents who are prone to prioritize math scores and reading levels and put their kids into extra academics in order to increase their math scores and reading levels, they themselves will say, am I doing the right thing? One mother said to me, are we just drilling kids and creating more competitive kids? Are we losing out on creativity? Are we losing out on the arts in the process? There feels to be a mutually exclusive option between music and arts on the one hand, and physical activity and playtime on the other hand, on one hand, and kind of these standardized assessments of math and reading and science on the other hand. But that's not true, right? A lot of people are doing great work to show how you can learn STEM ideas when you're engaged in physical play. A musical mind, right, at a young age even, helps grow cognitive abilities more generally. These are not mutually exclusive ideas, but they often get presented as such, as one subject discrete from the other subject. And then parents say, well, I wanted my kids to be good in this one subject, so I'll just promote that and lose out on the others. This is what reimagining education means. It means recognizing how cognitive development and social development and moral development, right, are not disciplinarily divided. And we can rethink those things.
Thank you. We have so many questions and comments, so we'll do quick questions and quick comments, Pawan, so we can get you out of here by 10 a.m. Eastern. Does your book touch on standardized testing? And what are your thoughts on this in terms of education? And I think you know, Pawan, that I have two 17-year-olds who are rising seniors. And obviously, we're hearing so many schools are dropping the SAT or the ACT for this year. Do you think that will also be a trend? So please talk to our former, our great friend, Mark Lee, who's been a guest on many of our shows.
Yeah, I think that the SAT and ACT, hopefully this is another nail, right, in their coffin, because what they end up doing, right, is rewarding privilege. And the studies show this. And however good they are at predicting, the achievements of a student in a school, they're better at predicting or just measuring privilege. And so they're not as valuable as we might think. And in general standardized testing, the 10th grade and 8th grade and 3rd grade levels, right, this is part of the problem, right? There should be some way of assessing the quality of an education. That's fine. But standardized testing creates a mentality, if nothing else, where that becomes the best form of understanding learning. And that becomes how we understand the best way to assess learning, through standardized testing and through more quantifiable assessments. Then of course parents are going to say, well, I want more quantifiable assessments for my kids to make sure they're learning more. I want more of this kind of teaching and learning. And that then impacts other things that we're talking about.
Mark says, I went to Jimmy Butler's college. I was there 20 years earlier. I was there when Doc Rivers was there.
There you go.
Marquette proud. And so for those of you not NBA fans, you won't know what the heck we're talking about. Love the design of the book cover. Let's hold it up again. We got to sell this book, Pawan. That's what we're doing.
I will say, okay, here we go. I'm bad at this.
There you go. That's the right side. Perfect. Just hold it there. And tell us about your, give shout outs to your editors, your collaborators, researchers, anybody you worked with. Yeah.
So this is published by NYU Press, and I'm happy to say, honored to say that we really worked hard to make this not a book that would just be assigned in classrooms, but we went out of our way this is my third monograph. And more than any other book I've written, this was not written just for the college classroom, or even with that in mind at all. It was written for people who listen to this, who watch this show, who are just curious about topics around education and childhood today, with them in mind, right? And to capture, there's some trends, right? So one of the trends in the book that starts with is the growth of these spelling bees and Indian kids. Spelling bees. There's a Netflix documentary about this called "Spelling the Dream" that's out right now, which I have the honor of being in, so I'm well aware of it. So this, it starts with these, what's wrong? What's with all these Indian kids winning spelling bees? And it starts with that to get into this broader issue of, oh wait, parents are pursuing education outside of school more and more for good reasons, but with some really problematic implications. And let's dig into that and understand how to unravel this. So shout out to NYU Press for their help in making this a worthwhile book, hopefully for others to read outside of just a single audience.
Sujana Chandrasekhar, our doctor and co-host of She's on Call, which starts at 11 a.m. Eastern, says, every time I hear your guests, I become their fangirl. Yes, this doctor is all about arts and creativity and running around and downtime and reading for pleasure. So there you have a fan. Now you have to watch her show, Pawan.
Oh yeah, I've actually seen part of the show. I should I have a notepad with me. I learn a lot. Seriously, I should write that down.
Ron Thomas, who's one of our former guests and a wonderful sponsor of our show. We're so grateful to him. You all must follow him on Facebook. He does these walks around Dubai where he's based, but he travels all over the world. He always tunes in. He's asking, is it available on Audible or one of the audio platforms yet?
It is it's not on Audible yet, but there will be an audio version of it being made, which is wonderful.
All right. Who's reading it? A professional reader?
Sree, I thought you would be a great person to read.
Let's keep going. So people are looking. Tell your editors or your publishers that people are looking, as they said in the comments. We have more comments also coming in. Spelling Bee is the Desi Super Bowl, says Sujana. Right. And you are in that show, and we're having the filmmakers on one of our episodes of the Daily COVID show coming up.
Wonderful. So Sam Rika and Chris Weller, yes.
Yeah, they're terrific. Yeah, and that's a great documentary. I saw it in the old-fashioned way in a theater a couple of years ago. Great. All right, let's keep going. There's so many comments coming in. We have about 20 minutes left with you, and we want to also get back to the paper. Oh, Chetna says, both my parents are retired professors, and I may be the odd Indian parent who allowed my 3 kids to have summers mostly free of academics.
Yeah, right. That you may be one of the odd Indian parents. Not that all Indians do this by any means, or all Asians do this. That's not. But yeah, you do see that pushing more education on their kids, again, for meaningful reasons, right? For thoughtful reasons, not kind of just one-dimensional ideas, is more pronounced among many Asian immigrants. And a lot of them will say, if we don't do this, then one father told me, if I don't have my daughter in a spelling bee, I worry she'll grow up to have a life of nothingness, right? That's what feels at stake. There's a sense of security and a sense of risk. And if you don't do extra things for your kid to help make them secure, there's a huge amount of risk you worry is impacting.
And that's our dog, Tara, who we also feel is underachieving sometimes.
There's downtime in there. That's definitely downtime.
Yeah, we feel like she could be doing more tricks. She could be doing other. That's Tara for you. I also wanted to just say that I interviewed Tom Friedman during the pandemic, and he said that immigrants are optimistic paranoids, and this is exactly what you were talking about, right? The fact that they are optimistic about America, but they're paranoid that if they don't do everything to stay ahead, they could lose everything. Exactly. And that's where that comes from. Critique for me, if you can, the Tiger Mom book. I think it's called The Battle Hymn of the Tiger Mom by a fellow professor, Amy Chu.
Amy Chua, yeah. So
Amy Chua, I think, yeah.
Yeah. So that became I'm sure your audience is aware, international bestseller a few years ago. And the idea behind the book, right, is it was somewhat, I think, mockingly, but it was taken very seriously, of being, there's Chinese parents raise their kids in a very kind of top-down, authoritarian way, where everything's scheduled and everything's academically focused. And if you don't do that, then you're basically raising, improperly. And it became a national, debate. Is this the right way of raising kids, and what happens to their kids? And I was like, there's something about that book, right, that it resonated for a lot of people. And after that book, there was all this critique of tiger parenting and how it's bad for kids and how tiger parents are wrong. But no one ever listened to the parents themselves who you might call tiger parents. Like, no one ever talked to them. We had Amy Chua represented this idea. You had, a billion op-eds and studies pushing back on it. But what actually motivates parents who think they want more education for their kids? Why do they do this, right? And that's what kind of set me off to study this topic, because whether they're Asian or not, and many of the families I talk to aren't Asian, right? They believe that without more education for your kids, then you are possibly creating problems for them. A lot of mothers we spoke to, wanted their daughters in after-school math classes because they're very worried that girls' confidence in math and then aptitude in math drops come middle school. And there's a lot of studies that show this. And, Larry Sumner's, right, the former president of Harvard and Clinton administrator, made comments around this kind of thing as well. So they had their daughters in after-school math classes in order to make sure that they don't drop. There's a lot of meaningful reasons why parents do this that a tiger parenting kind of stereotype misses, and then doesn't allow us to have thoughtful conversations around education.
Thank you, Pawan. So great to hear your thoughts as a scholar and as a parent yourself. Are your kids getting kind of a lighter summer than they might if they were somebody else's kids or somebody who had not done the research on this book?
Well, I do confess in the book that I enrolled our kids. My wife and I enrolled our kids in an after-school math center when we used to live in the Boston area when they were younger, because I was talking to a lot of parents who were doing this, and it just seemed like, this seems like so logical. How could you not do this? Becomes the question. And we did it, and we had them in there for a little while. And one of our kids liked it fine. One other one was like, this is some version of torture. And we pulled out both kids after a short time because we didn't want them to like burn out on something, and we were kind of wondering why we're doing this in a way. But so I'm not against, like, it's not like I'm going to say doing this is inherently wrong. No, some kids, it's a great activity for a lot of kids if they find pleasure in it. If you're trying to fix a real problem, that's one thing. If you've already talked to your teachers, you've already worked through your schools, and you have no alternative, then go for it, right? If your kid finds pleasure in this, then you should be pursuing what your kids can do if you can afford it, which is of course is a big if. But if you're doing it out of a sense of fear, right, that if you don't do this, then your kid will be behind. If you're doing it just to make your kids more competitive, then that's where the problems seep in, because there's no end to that, right? Never does a parent say, oh, my kids are competitive enough now, I don't need to worry about them anymore. That doesn't happen. You're always trying to, if that's your mindset, then you're always trying to make them more competitive. But if you parent out of a sense of opportunity, what opportunities do I see that my kids would appreciate, and how can I give that to them as a kind of active parenting model, then that becomes a more meaningful and healthy approach to this trend.
Thank you. We have about 15 minutes left. We want to take a look at the cover of what is owed. This is the New York Times Magazine. Before that, Jacqueline Dolly, who was my guest last Saturday, talking about career strategies for adults, says, if tiger parenting works, I don't see anything wrong with it. I think we should be exploring why it works and adopting aspects of it. What do you say to that?
Just a comment. Yeah, I mean, what does it mean by works, right? So there are children who get, let's just say, intense music lessons and academic lessons at a young age, and they grow academically and they grow musically. And if that's what you mean by works, then yeah, it makes sense. You put a lot of time and money into some kind of learning, and those kids learn that. That's not really controversial. The concerns become, right, are the kids burning out? Are the kids overly anxious? Are the kids losing their love of learning and just seeing it as a chore? I spoke with people for the book, and one said, as a kind of educator, what breaks her heart is that she sees kids who just don't care about learning as a result of this constant pressure to be academically advanced. And so think about it, school becomes a chore. Not that we can romanticize school as being something that kids are just going to love being in, but the more we kind of push it on the kids at a younger age without them finding pleasure in it, then it becomes something they just have to get done, like all kinds of chores, whether it's sweeping the floor or making your bed, things you just have to get done because they're just expected of you. There's no real value you feel in them. And that's one of the challenges or problems with tiger parenting, quote unquote, I would say. Even if the kids are poor, right? That's a short-term goal, but it could be long-term losses.
Chetna says we had our kids in Kumon and they hated it. And our own Paula Kiger says that she strongly believes that people shouldn't deride the Tiger Mom book without reading it. Her point is really about how she discovered via introspection that her approach may have had lots of cons. She wasn't necessarily espousing being a tiger parent, but that's how it got covered.
Exactly.
And,
the book was not meant as a how-to book. I agree.
Right. Okay, so let's look at the Times Magazine, big cover story on reparations. What is owed if Black lives are to matter in America? The nation must pay its debts. So we're now going to see how the magazine cover came together. It gives us a sense of how the editors think about the production of this magazine, and is again part of our effort to understand and celebrate the print aspects of this issue. So here we go. We're going to play this video for you.
From the New York Times Magazine.
This is behind the cover.
Our cover story this week is a really important essay by Nicole Hannah-Jones, making the case for reparations. Nicole explains how centuries of violence and government policies preventing Black Americans from building wealth in this country really lie at the root of the injustices and inequalities that people are out in the streets protesting right now. She makes clear that without some form of restitution, it will be difficult to achieve lasting justice.
This is a really bold and important essay, and we wanted a design that reflected that.
We thought about using archival imagery for this cover since so much of what Nicole writes about is historical.
But also we really wanted it to feel current, to be about this moment. We wanted to work with graphic designer Bobby C. Martin Jr. on this. We thought he could come up with conceptual ideas and also pursue typographic approaches.
One of the things that we initially asked Bobby to explore is a statistic that for every dollar in wealth held by white families in America, Black families hold 10 cents. In her piece, this wealth gap is even wider for Black families with children who hold only a penny for every dollar held by white families with children.
We also considered a typographic cover.
One of the first things that Bobby sent was an interesting cover in which he phrases Black Lives Matter and defund the police. We were all pretty intrigued with that.
And a lot of the typographic solutions, so he envisioned painting in the yellow letter forms to resemble the lettering painted on the streets in many of the major cities.
What is owed to Black Americans? Ultimately, that's what this story is about.
When you have a serious message, sometimes something less designed feels more forceful. We felt the scale and just the graphic power of it was right for the message.
This is a very bold and important essay. It's an essay that I think is trying to rise to the occasion, which is this movement right now for social justice and racial justice in this country. I think it's a piece of writing that can really change the world.
Wow, a piece of writing that can change the world. And you pointed out as soon as we started talking, Pawan, and this is the cover, What is Owed? And this could be, in many ways, an article that we'll discuss for many years to come. So everyone, please check that out. And you notice there's no question mark here, right? It's explaining what is owed rather than is anything owed at all would be the question. And go ahead.
One comment, if I may, is this is I think it's an important topic because it gets at the intersection of what we've been talking, the two major issues of our time right now, which is, the aftermath of the murder of George Floyd and police and criminal justice system approach to African Americans, and also COVID, right? And so the issue around wealth and the disparities and stratification. this reparations gets to the heart of both of those things. And it's not as if the country has not given reparations in the past. The country has given reparations to Japanese Americans in the early 1990s around internment, because of Japanese American internment. So the country's given billions of dollars in today's money and reparations in the past.
The issue is, of course, how do you decide who gets it? How do you educate it? Those are the things, right? So you're saying that we should definitely look at it, and how we do it is something that can be, it's in the details.
Yeah, well put.
Yeah. All right. We only have a few minutes left. Let's see if we have any other comments or questions that we can show you. Otherwise, we're going to just keep looking at the times here. And we also, Jacqueline says, the wealth gap statistic is a painful reality. I struggle with financial literacy education that does not address economic inequity in this country. And absolutely one of the issues that we're talking about here. And by the way, this is Governor Gretchen Whitmer of Michigan, who is somebody who's shown great leadership. And there's, as part of, we've seen all the studies saying that women leaders overseas have done better, countries led by women leaders. But I think states where women governors were allowed to lead, right? There was interference and other problems coming from Washington that prevented her from doing everything she wanted to do. But go ahead, you were saying something.
Sorry, just back to the point about the wealth gap, just to quickly highlight that is the very meaningful statistic or kind of approach to this, the wealth inequality as opposed to income inequality, right? And so just 10 seconds on this would be, income inequality, what we normally think about, how much do you earn? And there's an inequality in how much different racial groups earn. And that's very meaningful. But wealth, right, is actually what helps families grow generation after generation. So a wealth gap has much more meaningful problematic implications down the road more than income alone would. So I'm glad we're highlighting wealth gap, not income gap.
Thank you. I think that's beautifully put and something that we all need to understand as we go forward. You're also, we didn't get to touch on this. I was hoping to spend several minutes, but we can't. Talk a little bit about your work trying to advance and understand the Indian American experience as you did in Washington.
Yeah, thank you for asking. So I was a professor back, as I mentioned before, at Oberlin College, and took a leave to become a curator at the Smithsonian, which is a dream come true kind of position. And I worked in the Asian Pacific American Center there. And yeah, thank you for putting that up. So we worked on this, I can use the term, groundbreaking exhibition and programming called Beyond Bollywood, which highlighted the Indian Americans' impact on the nation. And we, I wasn't the only curator, by the way, I want to highlight that. But we worked on bringing to life stories, not just about kind of highlighting, oh, look how many great Indian Americans there are, because that would not be a compelling exhibition in my mind. It was more, we better understand our country, the nation, if we look at it from the point of view of one of its rising immigrant groups, historically and today, and the good and the bad. And so you're showing really wonderful photographs of, rituals, of ethnic culture that are alive and well in this country. And yet at the same time, I'm not sure what we'll see next, but there are so many more layers to that kind of story, right? Whether it be small business owners like this. And so one of the key kinds of small business that we see are motel owners, which I've written a bit before. This is the fascinating piece about, and we could pause for a second. So much of what people knew about India and Indians was through kind of vaudeville shows and these kinds of these magician shows. And so it was kind of all part of this Eastern mysticism that was a major theme at the time. And it still is, obviously, right? The Beatles, took advantage of that, and we still see it today. But that was a major, we keep going now. That was a major.
Just to be clear, that's not an Indian magician. It's an Indian magician in the trick. I mean, in the trick part of it,
yeah.
They either used an Indian, I don't know if it could have been a person in brown face also, right? But Thurston is actually a white guy, right?
Yeah, it was a white magician, and apparently someone who kind of discovered this trick in India, and of course perfected it, because that's what all happened, colonized things that the colonized invent. And so this was this example of this, like the person climbs up a rope that's not tied to anything, and the person disappears in the end. That's the idea of the.
Diana says, "I love Beyond Bollywood. I hope it one day becomes a book." So that's
a great
great.
idea. Yeah, yeah. And I'll just highlight, if I may, I'm part of another organization called the South Asian American Digital Archive, SADA.org, and we're putting together a book on South Asian American history and culture that's coming out hopefully this year. FYI.
Oh yeah, they're a great organization. The team there is wonderful, and
I'd
love to talk to them as well. Let's keep going here. These are the classic. Every immigrant in any group has a picture in the 70s of mom and dad. Maybe Niagara Falls is another.
Exactly, that's one of the highlights. Yeah, this picture here, right? Is early on in the 1920s, there were a lot of students came together, a lot of efforts to be. A lot of independence efforts actually were going on too. A lot of Indians and South Asians in the U.S. were working for independence of India from the British. There's a lot of organizing meetings around that. A lot of students came together. It was a very active time that in our nation's history that we don't think about in terms of Indians, at least in America.
Right, and this is so two quick things before we let you go on this topic. One is that the idea, I guess, is down the road there could be some kind of Asian American museum experience, right? That a physical museum, but it took so many decades for the African American Museum that is now built and is an amazing place. Everyone should go see that in Washington if you haven't done it. But that's the eventual idea around this, right?
Well, a museum takes an act of Congress. It's a Smithsonian museum, if we're referring to, takes an act of Congress to create. And so there's a lot of, there's so many, literal politics around that because it's an act of Congress, but also other kinds of more, P with a lowercase p, politics with lowercase p around it. Where would the museum be? Would it be on the mall? And if it's not on the mall, then what does that say? How much space is there? Should there be a Latinx museum? First, should we just completely reconfigure the National Museum around American history as opposed to developing other museums? There are a lot of questions that come into play that people in the Smithsonian are grappling with, good people are grappling with.
And they have a fabulous new leader in Lonnie Bunch, who was the head of the museum of the African American Museum, and now is in charge of the whole darn thing. So that's excellent. And they could also, doesn't have to be in Washington, right? It could be imagine it being in San Francisco or LA, a great city with great Asian influence. I think that would be amazing too. So and then there's a photograph that our friend Preston Merchant took that is of my wife and kids, or my mother and my kids dressed in Halloween costumes in the Beyond Bollywood exhibition.
Oh, wonderful!
A life highlight for them.
It was a really special place, and it's been traveling the country since, so that's good.
So we're going to pause. So I just want to bring our friend Pawan back on screen so we can thank him and say goodbye to you. We're going to go to our medical segment in just a minute. But before we do, again, hold up the book and tell them where they can learn more about you, your Twitter handle, give them all that good stuff. We've been flashing it on the screen, but we want to hear it from you.
Thank you, Sree. So Hypereducation is the new book, came out. It's available wherever you buy books. And I'm on Twitter at, as you can see, PHDhingra1. On Facebook, I have a website, PAWANHDhingra.com. But and you can email me the old-fashioned way if that's your speed, which is often my speed. pdhingra@amherst.edu. So anyway,
you're available for talks. You're available for Zoom conferences and other ways to get the story of this book out, right?
And I've said publicly that any honoraria I get will go to COVID relief.
Oh, wow. That's very, very kind and generous of you. And that's terrific. So folks, if you know someone who is putting together a conference or putting together an event, tell them to invite Pawan. And this is a great cause that he's supporting. But beyond that, the cause of knowledge about misunderstood and lots of misinformation also about the education sector. So this book will shine a light on it. One last time, it's called Hypereducation, why good schools, good grades, and good behavior are not enough. Hey, I memorized that. Look at that. I'm not even looking at the subtitle.
Very good. You get an A.
Yeah. Thank you. I appreciate that. All right. So now let's say thank you, Pawan.
Thank you very much.
Please take care
Perfect.
and much love to your family. And good luck with everything you're doing.
Keep up the good work.
Thank you. All right. Let's move now to welcome onto the screen our friend, Dr. Marina Kurian.
Hey, how are you?
Hello. How are, look at you. I'm like showing you from one place to another. I'll turn off this other camera in a second. But this is Marina Kurian, who is our guest here for 15 minutes of medical questions. So if you have any medical questions, please ask her. She's also the co-host of She's on Call, a new show that has its third episode today in about 50 minutes at 11 a.m. Eastern. So everyone, please stay tuned for that. I will be rebroadcasting it on my channels, but much better for you to follow Marina directly or go to She's on Call on Facebook, on Twitter, on YouTube, and watch the show there. So we think that's much better. So please do that. And Marina, thank you for being here. These horrifying headlines out of everything we're seeing about the crisis. Please talk about that.
So I think everyone's seeing them, right? That Florida, certainly our colleague last week on She's on Call, Dr. Nadia Hernandez had talked about, or Nadia Rodriguez had talked about what she's seeing at the ICUs and the hospitals in the Houston area. And now I just actually spoke to one of my girlfriends out in California, and she says they're just getting hit so hard. And part of the issue is they're not wearing masks. And the other part is, she said, you know, if you go to the beach, and I've heard this from my friends in Miami as well, you go to the beach, people are walking around, they're not wearing masks. And I think that's one prevailing theme. I mean, perhaps everybody's washing their hands, et cetera, but the social distancing and the masks are equally important. I know everyone's so sick of hearing it, but it's true. And so that is why I think we're seeing a rise in different parts of the country. And as you know, the governor here, actually the tri-state, so Connecticut, New Jersey, and New York, have instituted a quarantine for anyone coming from 9 different states across the country, that if they come to New York, they have to self-quarantine for 2 weeks, which is interesting because you think, why not, like if it's a medical professional, why not get tested, show that you're negative, and then do 3 days, monitor symptoms, et cetera. But I think it has a lot to do with the availability of testing for people to really full on travel. So while we thought, certainly in New York, we're in phase 2, and I don't know where Fire Island is. You're away, right, Sree? So, and Long Island is now heading into phase 3, whereas Manhattan, New York City is still in phase 2, and all those changes, we're going to be monitoring what's happening with our infection rate. And quite frankly, right now, New York City is doing pretty well. And I also feel that out on Long Island, where they're expanding their phase, and what that means for people is also making a difference, and not seeing a big uptick in any cases. So social distancing, masks, washing hands with soap and water all work. And I was in the grocery store here. You can't even find Purell, okay? So I found some alcohol spray, but we're going to talk about all that on She's on Call. So do stay tuned. From 11 to 12, we're going to be on with Dr. Sujana Chandrasekhar is my co-host, and then Dr. Jordana Cohen is an assistant professor at the University of Pennsylvania. She's going to be joining us. And then Dr. Olga Garcia is going to join us, and she is a chief resident out in California in the Ojai Ventura area. So she'll actually be also able to speak about the outbreak that we're seeing. Dr. Cohen is an amazing researcher, scientist, and she's our favorite statistician. So she's going to break everything down for you guys in simple terms to really understand what's up and what's going on with COVID. And just when we've all sort of been thinking that we're past a peak, other parts of the country break out, and 2, when we're just all so kind of sick of all this, right? We want to it's summer, we want to live, but we are living, which is so important, but we just have to live a little bit cautiously. Social distancing, masks when you're out in public.
And Dr. Olga Garcia is a second lieutenant in the U.S. Air Force, which is pretty cool that she's able to do that. And so she'll bring that perspective as well. So tell us why you called it She's on Call while we get some questions in from our audience.
She's on call. Well, we were, it's Sujana and I. So then, some of the focus was on like, we're women doctors talking, and we had like really boring names. And as I've said before, one of our producers, Rose, she was talking to her family about it and bouncing ideas back and forth. And we have to give total credit to her husband. He came up with She's on Call. And I was like, well, that's really great. Something that we both hear. Where's mom? She's on call. She's not here. But it's also a lot of, how we're on call, that for one, drawing attention to the fact that, there are a lot of women physicians out there. Med school classes are now 51% women, which is actually reflective of the population in general, right? I think it's 50.8 or 50.9% women in the world. And so the med school classes in the US are very reflective. But what we're not seeing is that catch up in our specialties per se in surgery. We're also not seeing that catch up in terms of what our faculty appointments are and our full professorships and our deans of medical schools. And that is also a little bit on track with what we're seeing in corporate America. Although I think in medicine, there might be a slightly better percentage of women in positions of leadership. And so just She's on Call, just to remind everybody, and I'm just as guilty when I talk to my patient, they're like, I got to make an appointment with my PCP. I'm like, oh, what's his name? And then I think, oh, wait, or is it a woman? And then, my patient's looking at me like, yeah, it's a woman, like, I can't believe you made that mistake. I'm like, well, because when you say I'm going to go see my surgeon, people are not always like, what's her name? It's just not. So,
and here we have a show hosted by two. And here we have a show hosted by two surgeons. There are several questions coming in, so we're going to do short questions and short answers because we need to get you into setup for the next show, which goes live at 11 a.m. Eastern. Your colleague, Sujana Chandrasekhar, your co-host, has already written in. We're starting at 11 a.m. sharp, so we're to make sure we do that. Doug says, with C19 cases up 65% and 3 days in a row of record new cases, should I just stay in my home and never come out again? He's in California.
So I think you can. I think you have to be safe, Doug. You can go out of your house. You just need to if you don't need to go out and you can do deliveries for groceries and stuff, then that's fine. We really need to see what's happening. If you look out your window and everyone in your neighborhood's walking around without masks, well, then that's a sign that that's not a good thing. And I think that you can go out. You just have to be safe and smart about it. There's certain things that you have to do. You got to go to the bank. I had to go to the bank, even though there's so much online banking. I had to go to the bank a couple of times, make deposits, do things that I just felt like I couldn't do from my phone or from home. And, going to the bank, going to the pharmacy, like all those things are important to kind of do. Now, you want to take advantage of any delivery services that are out there. So many pharmacies will deliver medication to your door, which might be helpful. And then I think ultimately you can go out. It just also need to look at your region and where in California you are, because each county is a little bit different. Just like in Italy, Northern Italy got hit so hard when, in January, February, and March. And Southern Italy really didn't have as much of an uptick as they did up there. And so it can't even be a question of whether it was population density, overcrowding, or age, because all of Italy, I think the demographics are very similar. So just look at your particular county. I'm sure that your papers are popping up, what the COVID rates are per county. I mean, they're certainly doing it in Florida. We did it in New York. We looked at all of our counties, and that's how we figured out who would go into which phase. So I think all of that is important. And I think it will be safe for you to go out. Just check your county and your local paper to see what the infection rate is right now.
I'm concerned about a potential of an uptick in cases here on Long Island due to the upcoming 4th of July weekend, and then in a couple of months, Labor Day weekend. We've got lots of questions coming in, so let's keep going and see. We had Laura was talking about the importance of masks. And what do we do when we see someone without a mask? We've seen horrifying incidents of somebody who calls out somebody about a mask and they come and spit at them or say, yell at them. So what do you advise? And when you see somebody without a mask, what do you do?
I don't do anything. I stay away from them. I'm like not going to go confront them. I give them a look. I have good looks. I can shoot people so they feel it. But I think you have to do what you can to personally be responsible. And wearing a mask is important. I will say with this heat now in the city, and I've been racing around trying to go to my office or walking home, it's so hot. And at some point, if there's no one around me, I'll take it down just to get like a breath of air that's not covered in either my surgical mask, or I do have some cloth masks that I use as well. So if you're somewhere where there's no one else and it's like an empty room, you don't just, it's like driving in your car. You don't necessarily have to have a mask on when you're all alone. But if you are feeling sick or you have a cough or a runny nose or anything like that, then you probably should be wearing your mask the whole time.
Thank you. And that was exactly what Laura was asking about. So that's great. We only have a couple of minutes left. What is your advice for people who are thinking of traveling, want to go out on the road? What can they do? Road trips in a bubble? Is that possible?
I think you can go. I think you have to be careful. You have to be safe. Carry Purell with you. If you're driving, you have to get gas. I mean, that was a thing I had to do. I'd go to my satellite offices, as physicians' offices were always considered essential. So I had to get gas. And so I don't always wear gloves, because I think the problem with gloves is if you keep them on the whole time, then you start touching everything, and I find that problematic. So I just use Purell after I touch all the buttons. I mean, there's so many things, right? You never think of like, oh, how could I pick something up? And you're touching the buttons put in your zip code on the gas pump, and then pulling out the gas pump handle. So then I just Purell when I get back in the car. I think that making, pit stops when you're driving, there's a RV commercial out right now, Sree. I don't know if you heard that. You can rent an RV, right? Go on the road. But if you don't have an RV, you have to make a pit stop to go to the bathroom. That's also okay to do. Use the same things that you would do. You use the paper towel to open the doors after you dried your hands, and use Purell liberally while you're out of your house. But when you get back home, soap and water.
All right. So with that, thank you so much, Marina. Please, everyone, follow her. She's at Marina Kurian on Twitter, and at She's on Call is the show. And you can follow the show and find everything by going to at She's on Call on Twitter, at She's on Call on Facebook. Those are the best ways to kind of subscribe to the show. There's also a YouTube channel. She and her co-host Sujana and Marina, two surgeons, and their two guests today are Dr. Jordana Cohen and Dr. Olga Garcia. And this is their third episode. There's so much to learn. Please watch the show. Tell your friends to watch the show. They will learn a lot. I promise you that. This show is a spin-off of this show, as well as what we do in the New York Times Read Along every evening. Before we say goodbye to Marina, I'll just show you our guest for tonight's 9 p.m. Sunday New York Times Sunday COVID show. We always do a show around positivity, and we're doing how can you be positive in the middle of this pandemic? Well, Will Sutton will show you how. He's a dear friend, past president of the New York National Association of Black Journalists, a column for The Advocate and New Orleans News. So he's a New Orleans through and through person, and he's going to talk to us about how to stay positive and also take questions from all of you. So please join us 9 p.m. Eastern. And Marina, thank you so much for today, and good luck and congrats on everything you've done with that show. It's been so much fun to watch how you folks have come together and done a show that's a great service to everyone.
Thank you so much. Thanks. And also for you guys, Sree is one of our executive producers also. So I want to thank you, because you put together a great team, and one that really works well together. So thanks a lot. And hopefully I'll see all you guys at 11. And you can see us on my Facebook, YouTube. Is YouTube up, you think, Sree?
Yeah, we'll have Facebook, YouTube, and LinkedIn. Also, we're doing it off of my LinkedIn Live so that they can see it. And the good news is I'm not on the air on this show. I'm behind the scenes producing, and it's a great honor to work with these 4 doctors this week on this show. She's on call. Everybody tune in. 11 p.m. Eastern.
Thanks.
Sorry,
so
go
much.
ahead, Marina. Go ahead. All right, bye-bye. And with that, folks, I'm going to bring Neil back on so we can say thank you to everyone and thank our producers, so that I can go and play Neil his role as an executive producer on that show.
Absolutely. We definitely want to thank our producers, Paula Kiger, Julia Weeks, Steve DeReeve, and Carla Baranakis. We also want to thank our sponsor, Sree, one last time to make sure that people know how appreciative we are with
We
our
want to
support.
thank the Muckrack Academy. It's already out. It says coming June 15th, but the certification course is already available. 2 hours of work. You can do it in 2 hours or 2 months. Please go to mrac.co/social, and big thanks to everyone who signed up. 4,000 people have signed up for this course, and we're getting great reviews. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. And then we also want to recognize Magic Bus. Magic Bus imagines a world where children break out of poverty and lead fulfilling, rewarding lives, contributing to their community and to the world around them. As you can see from the card, 7 out of 10 adolescents do not have a higher secondary qualification. 6 out of 10 youth do not have the soft skills necessary for employment. 3 out of 10 girls are married before they reach the age of 18. These are, of course, our stats focused on India. But thank you, Magic Bus, for your support of the New York Times Read Along. And in addition to Muckrack and Magic Bus, we also want to recognize Strategy Focus Group. Strategy Focus Group is a global team of human capital strategists committed to helping organizations solve people issues within your organization. They do that by working alongside you to solve your toughest problems and helping you capture your greatest opportunities. Thank you to Greg Gallant and Mike Schneider from Muckrack, Pradnya Haldapur from Magic Bus USA, and of course Ron Thomas, who had several comments on the show today, and from Strategy Focus Group. We definitely encourage you to learn more about our sponsors. You can click on their links, readalong.link/muckrack, readalong.link/magicbususa, readalong.link/strategy focus group. And if you're interested in sponsoring the New York Times Read Along, please contact Sree or myself. Shree's email address is sree@sree.net, and my email address is neil@neilparekh.org. So thank you for your support and for helping us do the great work that we're doing with these great guests. I do want to do another reminder about next week's guest, Sree. Again, very thrilled and very excited that we're going to have Trish Hall, the former editor of the New York Times op-ed page, and author of, she is the author of Writing to Persuade. So again, thank you to Carla Baranakis for helping to coordinate that. And this came just as the backstory. This was, I think, 2 weeks ago, or even was it last week when Tom Jolly was on. A reference was made to Trish Hall and her book. And during the show, Carla started reaching out to her, and we were able to book her fairly quickly. So again, thank you for that, Carla. With that, Sree, I think that we're going to call this show to a close, and thank everyone for joining us. Again, you can see us every week on at 8:30 a.m. Eastern Time on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, and YouTube, often with a guest. So please join us. You can find our archives on YouTube, and you sign up for alerts.
Yeah, youtube.com/SreeNet. So please make sure you get an alert on, you subscribe so you get the alerts, and check out the archives. We have the 100+ episodes of the daily COVID-19 show, and many of these episodes here that we do on the read along. And we're always looking for speaker ideas, guest ideas, and sponsor ideas for all our shows, including She's on Call. So please let us know how we can collaborate. You have friends, all these big companies. We haven't even talked about this, Neil, but all these big companies are taking their ads off of other social media platforms. Come and sponsor quality content on our shows, and we would be grateful for that. So with that, let's say goodbye and thank our guests again. Marina Kurian was just with us. She's the co-host of She's on Call. She was in our medical segment. And Professor Pawan Dhingra, author of Hypereducation, Why Good Schools, Good Grades, and Good Behavior Are Not Enough. Big shout out to Steve Taylor. We called him Steve DeReeve, but he's His Twitter handle is Steve DeRee, but he's at Steve. He is Steve Taylor, Paula Kiger, Carla Baranakis, Julia Weeks, and Neil Parekh. Everyone for making this possible. Thank you. Watch the read along. You can rewatch it right now on all these platforms because it starts right away. And 11 a.m. Eastern is She's on Call. Thanks very much, everybody. See you next week. Trish Hall, former op-ed editor of the New York Times, is our guest. So exciting. We'll see you 8:30 a.m. Eastern Time, July 5th. It is a holiday for some people in America, and others it's just Sunday. So join us then. Bye-bye, everybody.